Feeling like you will never be ready? Are you waiting to take the first step towards the thing you have been longing for? You need to know that when it comes to making the changes in your life you want, you may never feel ready. You may feel fear, stress, and afraid of failure. Sometimes you might feel ashamed because you've stayed in a situation longer than you would have liked. In this situation, you need to forgive yourself. In fact, you will have learned important things from this journey. So it's time to ask yourself, are you willing to settle for what you have now? What are you sacrificing to stay here? Join me this week with Evelyn Fuson when we discuss that it's time to take the first step in your life, as well as a few things we have learned along the way from our terrible relationships.
Yes, it could fail. But I see, even with failure, I don't even like this word anymore because our concept of failing is that we've flopped, it was no good, it's not useful, we fear this failure. But that's how we learn. It's how we've always learned. As children, how did we learn how to walk? We had to crawl first, and it meant falling down, and it meant trying things that didn't work. It meant same thing with dating, right? Trying on different partners, on different conversations to go like, well, that wasn't any good. Like that's not going to take me forward. It didn't feel great. Or going through years of that, of like really figuring out how to negotiate in life, what feels good to us, what we like, what we don't like. And in business or in any of our creative endeavors, the process is the same. So instead of going, well, until I have enough credentials, until I have this perfected persona, which never happens, by the way. If people really listen to actual speakers who will go there with you, they'll tell you they still have to do it afraid. They still have to. I heard a podcast today where they were talking about bits and pieces of this, and they were talking about, they had a conversation with Russell Brunson around something, and he was talking about money flow issues. And I'm like, Russell Brunson owns an island. So we think about, if we reach this point, we're going to be set, and there's not going to be any fear. There's not going to be any of these nuanced conversations and internal battles that we have to have. But instead, like, what if the fear also gets to be exciting? Because there's another piece there too. When we actually have the levels of different changes in our brain, I'm losing my words. Fear and excitement actually look the exact same on a neurological level. The only difference between it is the meaning that we attach to it. So I think, again, if we change the narrative around what fear means, that, oh, I can't go there because I'm not X, instead of going, ooh, that feels a little scary. I wonder what's the invitation on the other side of this. So really changing that relationship.
I love that. Fear as an invitation. That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's great. It's funny you should say that, because fear's been something that I've been thinking about as well. And I think fear, and I love the analogy of the car. And I feel like as well with fear, sometimes it can be so sneaky that we don't actually realize that is what is stopping us. It might feel like a wall. We might feel like we're stuck. We might feel like we can't move forward, and we might not realize why. And we have a million reasons, because it's, we don't have enough money yet, we don't have enough qualifications, we have a million reasons why we can't do it. But sometimes it's hard for us, I think, to identify that is fear. That is fear telling us, our brain telling us all these little things, keeping us safe and cozy, and thank you, brain, for doing that job. But it's like fear is, and that's something that I've been thinking about, is how do you tell people that is fear when they don't realize that's what's stopping them? How do you make them realize that wall that their brain is creating is their brain functioning from fear, and it's your brain doing its job? So your brain, it's not, don't get down on yourself here, don't be negative, be happy that your brain is doing such a great job. But it's not exactly helpful. And I've been thinking more about the is this a helpful thought or not? You know, is this something that you need to listen to? Is this something that's holding you back? And I think in some way that negates fear, but I think just the fact that knowing fear is there and knowing fear is stopping you, I feel like definitely in my life that there's real power in that, because it's a real education piece that just makes you say, okay, no fear, not today. You know, like once you know that it's there, you can start to face up against it. But yeah, sometimes when we're stuck, we don't realize that the wall is fear around us. I feel.
Yes. Well, and you know, it's interesting, that same podcast, they were talking about how there's somebody, it was a panel, and one of the guys was like, you know, adults who say they're stressed, it's just the adult word for fear. And I was like, ooh, that's interesting. Let's try that on for a second. I thought through it. I'm like, that's interesting, right? Because we're projecting all of these things about these outcomes that could happen, and we're stressing ourselves out, but it really is fear. Yeah. Another way to identify too, to know if you're scared, is to pay attention to how you feel in your body. There was an exercise that sometimes I use with my own clients from a book called I Hope I Screw This Up by Kyle Cease, which is amazing. And there's an exercise where he has you go through and write down all of your desires. Like, you know, if I was expanded, fully expressed, all of these things, and it's written out way more eloquently than I'm putting it out here. And you go through and you like really like let yourself go there. And you put it on like a half the side of the page. So you're going to leave another column. So on like the left side, you're going to put your expanded. Then on your right side, and you pay attention to how your body feels like excited, revved up. Then on the right side, you write all the reasons why you can't have those things. And when you go through that exercise, you feel your body contract and get really tight. And so that's another way too, to start training yourself to feel like, how do I feel when I'm feeling supported and expanded and in possibility, versus how do I actually feel in my body? I feel tight, I feel confined, I feel scared, I feel all of these things. You'll feel that compression almost like on your chest. So that's another way to tell, am I moving in possibility, or am I moving in fear? And or being held back in fear. And another one of my favorite quotes of all time comes from The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And he said, the limits that we settle for are the ones that we get to keep. So even when we are feeling stuck in fear, something to come back to, something to keep in front of us is this the limit that I'm going to settle for? Am I willing to die on this hill? Hill. I'm from Kentucky, so sometimes I got a little twang in there. Is this the hill that I am willing to die on? Am I willing to stay stuck in this area? And you know, sometimes we stay on those hills longer than we anticipated, and it's just because we weren't ready. And in some cases too, we'll let the fear stay because we feel a lot of shame because we've stayed there for too long. We should have moved further. We should have moved faster, all of these things. But then in that token too, then there's got to be some forgiveness that comes in too, because what else have you learned by staying on the hill about yourself? For me, going back to the relationship example, I held on to a relationship for 6 years, like clung to that thing that was no good. It was horrible for me, emotionally abusive, all of these things. And why? Why did I do that? A lot of it came down to a savior complex of what I believe love should feel like, that in order to have a loving relationship, I needed to actually save the other person, which of course I'm a coach, so it happens. I also have a background in ministry. It happens. It's the patterns that you learn, right? And so there were things that I learned about myself and had to face about myself. But after coming out of that, after going through it, of being willing to watch how many things I sacrificed in myself to make something so horrible work, I was like, woo, that's uncomfortable. Never again. Never again. It's made me resilient in boundaries and fighting for what I deserve and stepping into that. And now I have a partnership too that I'm like, I still am like pinching myself. I'm like, is this real? Like, this is crazy. But I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known had I not walked through. So again, there's also forgiveness that comes into that conversation too. So shame, all of those things that can play out, that we just got to go, like, I'm done. I'm done shaming myself. I'm done berating myself for being in this place. Like, okay, we're done with that. So like, let's actually make this useful. Let's actually move towards something that we want. And a lot of times too, we think, sorry, I'm talking a lot, Annie. We think that it means too that we've got to make this big grand gesture of this, I'm a changed person and I've got to have all of these things ready. And that's not true human nature. It's like in small micro habits, right? If we're going to start going to the gym, oftentimes too, it might just be okay, I'm going to set my clothes out and put the clothes on. And then if I feel like driving there, I'll drive there. But a lot of times too, if you can just put the clothes on, you'll take the next step to go.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, sorry, all of the verbal vomit.
No. I love it. And I mean, but the story is one that just is universal. Yes, we were talking about a relationship in particular, but it's for everything, the thought processes, and there's so many reasons that we might get stuck and keep ourselves stuck and justify that position to ourselves and feel shame around it. And there's all of this noise that's not very helpful that's going on. But it's that realizing that strength to move forward. And and it goes back to us talking about failures. And I think about this when I think about past failure type relationships I've had, that thank goodness I had them, because I am who I am because of them. And I've been able to find an amazing person because I know what amazing looks like. I wouldn't know that amazing looked like this 20 years ago, but I went through some real failures, some real education pieces. And thank goodness I did. They weren't very fun at the time, as I'm sure you understand, but thank goodness, because we're on the other side of them. And I think I find it hard to find strength in that when you're in the moment, when some people, wisely people can say to you, this, you'll be better for this. And when you're heartbroken or you're struggling or you're upset in your job or whatever, it doesn't feel great, but those annoying people always turn out to be true. Right. Wise advice is always true.
Yes, there's going to be beauty in the ashes. And I'm like, well, I didn't want to come to a barbecue and I wasn't expecting for my life to go up in flames. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So my friend, that's it for this week. But tell me, did something in today's chat resonate with you? If so, I'd love you to leave your thoughts in a comment so we can chat about it there. Until next week,